It's my pleasure to have joining us Jeff Jarvis.
Good afternoon. That's an awfully big plug even for me. Now, which way do I go? Yeah. I didn't so much write a book about Google, but a book about the changes in the world. I figured it was best to see them through the lens of Google because Google's just so damned successful. And I went through and came up with a list of 40 rules of how I think this operates. You could do the same thing with Amazon or eBay or other companies that are successful. I chose Google for fairly obvious reasons. So I have a book filled with aphorisms, and I figured I would skip a step. There's What Would Google Do, the book, the audio book, the e-book, the v-book, and there's also What Would Google Do, the PowerPoint. And it is available online at SlideShare, so you can feel free to, under Creative Commons, you can take whatever you want. I'm going to motor through some of these rules because I really want to get to the discussion of the future of advertising and marketing in this googly world. I will spare you my tale of Dell. But one of the lessons I got out of it was the notion that the worst customer is the best friend. We've heard that before, but it really occurred to me that you have customers who are trying to help you. They want to like your product. And the fact that they care enough to complain is an advantage. And how do you learn from them? How do you act on that immediately and turn that into something good? And then your best customers really are going to sell you. This is more about media and about networks and platforms. Important lesson for you is that it's not one-stop shopping for marketing anymore. You don't just go to upfront and good, we're done, let's have a drink. It's a much more complicated world, and you know that. Steve said it better than I could, but everything you do needs to be in public. Everything a brand does needs to be in public. And not just about, yeah, we got a website, but everything possible. The more public you are, the more Google juice you have. Brands, I think, are soon going to be evaluated or valued on their Google juice, on how high they rise up in Google. And your brands are your people, and your brands are your customers. They're not one department that sets out what the brand is. So making as much public as possible is vital. And then once you do that, we'll talk about this more in a second, but of course, your product becomes your ad, and your customers become your ad agency. I pick on Yahoo a bit in the book because I think it's the last old media company operating under the old media models, owning and controlling centralized content, thinking the brand is a magnet that will draw us in, and when it doesn't, advertising to bring us in. Yahoo! I can't do it on my bass. But we don't have a silly sound like that for Google, do we? Because Google didn't have to. Why? Because the product is the ad and the customers are the ad agency. We distributed Google. And that's obviously the win of wins. We'll talk about that more in a second. What does that mean for advertising, marketing, and PR? Just a quick story. Mark Zuckerberg was at Davos. I get accused in the book of name dropping. I actually just place drop. I mentioned Davos too often. And 2 years ago, and he was meeting a room of media moguls and executives, and one, it's off the record, but I asked Mark if I could quote him. I didn't ask the mogul who questioned him whether I could quote that person. But that person begged Mark, just begged him, said, Mark, how do we get a community like you have? We should own a community. How do I do this? How do I create a community? You didn't tell us. How? And Mark, who is known for being a geek of few words, answered with 2. You can't. Full stop, geeky stare, right? And he came back later and he explained more, and he said, you guys are asking the wrong question. You don't create communities. Communities already exist. They're already doing what they want to do without you. The question is, how can you help them do what they do better? How can you bring them elegant organization? It's a wonderful little phrase. I think that's true, certainly in media, but it's true of all of us. We are organizing principles. We're helping people to do what they want to do. How do we help them do that better? It's a pretty obvious question, but it's the great question to ask. Small is the new big. I blogged that at almost the exact same second Seth Godin did, but he got the book out of it first. But I think it's important for the structure of what you deal with. Now, I held a conference at CUNY in network journalism a year and a half ago, and one of the people there said, yes, you want to be small, but to succeed at being small, you have to be part of something big. And that's where the networks and platforms come into place. But I think you're dealing with a mass of niches, not the mass market. The mass market, the one-stop shopping is over. Raymond Williams, famous sociologist, said, my friend Jay Rosen uses this quote all the time, and I use it now all the time, there are no masses, only ways to see people as masses. I'm not a mass. Are you a mass? Are you a mass? No, we're not masses. But we're treated like masses because of the means of production, distribution, and marketing of the way the world worked. I don't want to sound like Herr Marx here, but that was the way the world worked for a reason, and it doesn't work that way anymore. And we don't want it to work that way anymore. When I was a TV critic, which I'll confess to being and I'll confess further, I did it for People magazine, in the mid-'80s, and that mid-'80s were a very important time. It was when the remote control passed 50% penetration on our couches. And that, along with the VCR and the cable box, gave us control of the consumption of media. And I'll argue that is a straight line to the control of creation of media, as Steve said in a second. But at the consumption level, I was on a CBS morning show at the end of a season talking about ratings, and the producer came up to me and said, well, okay, summarizing, Jarvis, you're clearly saying that the American people have taste. I said, God, no, I wouldn't say that. I'm a snob. This is TV we're talking about. This is the vast wasteland. No, of course not, I wouldn't say that. What are you saying? No. And she said, well, Jarvis, you're saying that the shows at the top of our ratings are all good this year, and the shows at the bottom of the ratings are all bad. It was a ding moment. Honest to God, it was a life-changing moment. It taught me to trust the people. And if you don't essentially and inherently trust the taste, intelligence, goodwill of the people, then you don't believe in free markets, democracy, reform religion, education, journalism, art, anything. Right? If I think you're all a bunch of dolts, then why would I waste my time with you? You're not dolts. You know more than I do. Why am I talking? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But that was an important moment for me, and I think it's an important moment for all these companies. So when you treat people as masses, they don't like you for it. They hate you for it. They don't want it. In the book, I speculate about how a whole raft of industries, and I won't go through them all, we'll just go to advertising quickly, but a whole raft of industries can change with this way of thinking. And I think about trying to remake Detroit a little too late. And what if Detroit no longer treated us as masses? The reason they do is because of the efficiencies of their means of making things, but that's got to end because I drive every morning on Route 1 and 9 in New Jersey, and I see this giant lot that is filled with cars that are not selling 50% a month down, right? Now, if years ago Detroit had opened up its process, had gotten rid of its secrecy, I forget where it was, but it's okay. Yeah, I skipped a few, didn't I? You thought you were lucky, huh? We would have told them, many of us would have told them years ago, would you just please put a friggin' 39-cent plug into the car radio so I can plug in my iPod, right? Or Walkman at the time. Well, they didn't because they had no means to listen to us. How about if they opened up and they could hear us in new ways? What would happen? So the idea of treating people specially matters, and it's not about treating us as a mass. Now, at the same time, Google does commodify brands, especially in media, and that's a challenge for us. But the answer to that is what Steve says. You stand out in that by having a human, strong voice, giving real value. It's a level playing field, but you stand out by doing something special. One quick one on decide what business you're in. I think we're all in a different business. All of us, all industries are in a different business than we think. Auto manufacturing may not be auto manufacturing, it may be transportation. Newspapers should damn well have said 10 years ago or 15 years ago when the commercial browser came out that we're not in the paper business. And it's they're holding on to that security blanket that has them so screwed today. What are advertisers? What are marketers? What are brands and companies? What are we really? Yahoo, to pick on them again, asked years ago, what are we? We're an entertainment company. So they went and hired a studio guy to make them into a Hollywood entertainment company. Well, they're wrong. They should have seen long ago they were an advertising company. They could have been Google before Google was Google, but they weren't because they asked the question wrong. We have the opportunity, we have the need right now to ask the question again. So when we treat these people differently, this is a great line from David Weinberger, who wrote a wonderful book called Everything's Miscellaneous. And David comes out with these lines, these brilliant lines, just like popcorn. But it's so true that when we start to trust people, then they will trust us back. When we give them control, they will trust us for doing so. When we treat them like kindergartners, masses, and idiots, they will not trust us. And it's true of companies, it's true of government, it's true of universities and educators, it's true all around. So listening is so obvious, we say it all the time. But when Dell started, Dell, number one, had people blog, like Richard at Dell. Number two, they went out and created, or they had technicians go out and read bloggers' problems and then fix them. Imagine what happened. The bloggers now blogged, shit, you won't believe what happened. Dell fixed my problem. Wow, right? Great stuff happened. That's why they're all on Twitter, these Comcast and all these companies. This weekend, to use Steve's line, bitch meme that I kind of accidentally started was I got my new Kindle and I was having trouble making it work. And you know, the problem with Kindle is it's so immediate. So I was on there blaming the Kindle. It was not Kindle's fault. I'm sorry, Amazon. Sell my book, please, I'm sorry. It was actually Sprint's fault. Now Sprint has somebody on, and I said, aha, it's Sprint. When I went up the street, it worked. And now Sprint has somebody who's watching Twitter. But his response was so phone company. It was, well, it's not our problem. We didn't have a network outage. You should be calling Amazon. You know, you were better off not Twittering, fella. You know, you just acted like a phone company again. You got to listen, not just give me, let me explain, sir, our policy. No! Let me explain my policy, right? So, nobody ever wants to hear my policy. So when Dell also started Dell Idea Store, using a platform from Salesforce, the Ideas platform from Salesforce.com, which has since been used by the Obama administration. But in the meanwhile, Starbucks has used it. And what happens at Starbucks is customers come in. Anybody seen my Starbucks idea? Okay, some of you have. Well, I'll explain the rest. You go to my Starbucks idea and you make suggestions to the company. Now, we've always had suggestion boxes, but the important difference here is it's in public. And so somebody came in and said, you know what I really want? I want to take my card, and instead of just having my money on it, I want my drink order on it. And when I come in, I want to waive it. And my money goes out, my drink order goes in, I go around to the end, and I get my drink. And there were 3 or 4 ideas somewhat like that. And what I realized was the customers were coming in and they were complaining about the lines at Starbucks, but not one of them complained. There was no bitch me mean stuff going on, right? Instead, given the opportunity, knowing they'd be heard, knowing they'd be part of a discussion, knowing the employees were there and were treating them seriously, they suggested things. They were there to help. Hi, I'm your customer, I'm here to help. Right? That's pretty amazing, but you've got to have the means to listen. You've got to hear that they don't like the lines. You've got to hear that I want that 39-cent plug in there. Now, Google is not exactly the most transparent company on earth, but one thing about them that is very transparent is their habit of releasing betas. And it's a really important thing. When they release a beta, what they're really saying is, this product is unfinished and imperfect. Help us complete it. That is an act of transparency. It is an act of humility and humanity and imperfection. And how many other companies can do that? Now, I don't want to fly in a jet with a beta engine or drive a car that's still in beta, but I do want to open up that process as early as possible and get the intelligence of the people. I speculate in the book about remaking restaurants this way. I still want the chef to make my meal. She still decides, but if she could hear the people in the room with suggestions, wouldn't that be better? So being a beta, how do brands stop acting in their advertising as if they're perfect? Because that's what you had to do. In fact, the whole means of production and distribution, Herr Marx, was that we got one chance to make this right, whether it's a newspaper or a car, we are going to act like it's perfect. Well, it's not. Never has been, never will be. It's a process. How do we get away from product think into process think? And when you do that, when you open up as a beta, you thus inevitably become collaborative. Right there. Because you can now hear, because you're going to act on that if you're anybody but Sprint, you are collaborating. You know things are fast and live, and you've heard about Twitter, so I'll skip past that. Finally, Craig Newmark, my friend Craig, when he started Craigslist, he didn't know that it would destroy newspapers as we know them. It was not his intent, nor did he really. It's not really Craig's fault. He didn't know that after Katrina, people would use his little tiny functionality to find homes and jobs and each other. He didn't come out with a huge manual that says, use my product this way, and I'll have a little talking paperclip to tell you how. He just put out a product and got out of the friggin' way. And people used it however they wanted to use it, and they surprised him. They surprised us all. That's when you've won in this world, when people take it over. So I then go through a whole bunch of industries. I'll spare you all of that. Everything from restaurants to universities to airlines to power companies to insurance companies and so on. I'll spare you all that. Let's talk about, and I also, by the way, confess that I'm an utter and complete hypocrite for selling a book. I should have made it a digital product that was searchable and linkable and clickable and discussable and updatable. Why didn't I? I got an advance. That industry still works for now, and I'm glad I did. And I also got other value. You know, they have the connections to the bookstores and so on. So God bless HarperCollins, and I got it. But let's talk about advertising and marketing. In the book, let's see if I find this real quickly. Peter Biggs, who's an ad executive in Australia, said on the ABC Radio National Media Report, recently canceled, saying, it's a consumer-driven business, but they are not our most important audience. Our most important audience is our clients and their brands. Rashad Tabakawala, the often quoted chief innovation officer from Publicis, says, on the other hand, no. He says, our fixation should not be on our clients. It should be on the people our clients want to engage, sell, and interact with. We should be the champions of those people. That is where we are missing the boat. And when I thought about that, and you take that to the extreme, you start to wonder whether you start to tear apart the notion of an ad agency or a PR agency, or whether the PR agency maybe starts to win some of these battles. Because if you think about advertising in one way, advertising is failure. If the ideal is that you have a direct relationship and connection with your customer, the ideal is that you have a great product so great they tell the world about it. They sell it for you. The ideal is that they help each other and support each other in this product. The ideal is that they trust you and know you have a human voice and can talk to you. If the ideal is a direct relationship with this customer, then why would you advertise? You know, I argue that newspapers should turn off the press and ask themselves, what are we now? Well, maybe brands should, pardon me, turn off the advertising entirely, and then ask, why do I spend my first dollar? Because if the ideal is to be Google and hardly spend money at all and have a great product people pass around, then advertising is failure. When you fail at that, for obvious and good important reasons, nobody knows about my product, it's brand new. I've had a problem and I've fixed it and I gotta tell them. I have a new price and they should know that. You know, whatever it is you need to tell them, fine, but it is a fall from grace. Grace is, they love me, they love my product, they talk about my product, they support my product, I made the product they wanted because I listen to them and I hear them because I have a relationship, then advertising is failure. Or if you look at it another way, in this commodified world of the internet, then if you and as Steve said, customer support, what's your line, Steve?
Well, I call it get satisfaction, everyone wants to be satisfied, that's the fact.
Right, but what's the new what?
Customer service is the new PR.
Thank you. Customer service is the new PR. It's also the new advertising, right? When Dell put up a deal on Twitter, people passed it around for Dell. When Dell goes out and fixes that problem with a blogger, that is an act of marketing. It's not just customer support, it's marketing. So customer support is the new marketing. A great product is the new marketing. Your product is your ad, your customer is your ad agency. So if you reduced your ad spending to zero, and you want to spend your first dollars, where should you put them in a commodified world where everybody can find the prices of anything in an instant? I would say you put it first into product quality. You next put it into customer support. And then, why do you spend the next dollar? Why do you spend that dollar in advertising? Because of the reasons I listed before. Now, obviously I'm not suggesting this, and in fact I want to turn right around now and say, please don't listen to me on this. Because I'm in media and I need you. We need you more than ever, right? Because, and I have this discussion now with people who get very mad at me when I say I don't think people will pay for news online because it's a commodity. We'll get into that. But media are going to be ad supported more than ever. And we have to help this community be more efficient about that in the media side of things. And we're very bad about that. And you have to be smarter about creating new networks in new ways. So I'm not really suggesting that advertising disappears, but I will suggest that in every single industry that exists today, if automobile industry is completely blown apart, if the banking industry is blown apart, if the newspaper industry is blown apart, well, guess what? You're all next. And the reason that you've been somewhat isolated from this, I think, is because you have the checkbook and we're all nice to you. But indeed, Google is an avalanche. It's coming down the hill, and it's taken over newspapers, and it's taken over media, and it's taken over everything else. It's going to take over advertising, too. I think that you have to rethink what you do in advertising and PR from scratch. Now, so finally, if you go back to Rashad's contention, that it's about a direct relationship, then what is the role of an agency, advertising or PR, in that? If the company itself and the brand itself and the company's employees themselves should have the direct relationship with the people, then what is this middleman of the outsider doing there? Well, they're probably there to advise the company, to help the company. And in that way, maybe PR is in a better position than ad agencies. by the way, because that's what PR companies do. But PR companies don't buy ads on blogs, and that makes me mad at them. I don't like them. Or newspapers or other places. But the idea that you are perhaps more consultants, you are truly the champions of the people. Can you really be the champions of the people to a company? Can you speak truth to the company? Can you, I'll pick on Edelman and Walmart, yell at Walmart when they screw up? And is there a business there? These are all questions that I don't have answers, but they're hard questions for where we go. So I'll end there. And arguments.